So we continue to make prayers and dedications for the conflicts in the world, for natural disasters, for people involved in that, for the wildfire season that's already begun, for climate change. And even though we're doing all these things, I keep thinking in my mind that there's got to be something else I can do, because it just doesn't feel like it's enough. So fortunately, oh, and yes, I'm trying to be less of a jerk on top of all of that. But there must be something else that I can do. And so fortunately, we have these endless numbers of teachings. And the other day I was looking in volume 3 for something else, and I came upon these 3 paragraphs that have answered this question that keeps going in my mind. So His Holiness writes, with the help of Venerable Children, compassion acts like preventative medicine for many of our afflictions. Well, that makes sense right off the bat. We can't have an afflicted mind and at the same time have compassion for the suffering of others. And in this case, these are Venerable Children's words, having a mind that involves an openness to being moved in the face of pain and suffering. We allow ourselves to bear witness to the difficulties we and others face and to be touched by this suffering. This experience of being moved by suffering gives rise to the motivation to help make things better. I'd like to read from An Open-Hearted Life. And in the introduction, this is by His Holiness that supports what I just articulated. So he says, our world is increasingly interdependent, but I wonder if we truly understand that our interdependent human community has to be compassionate. Compassionate in our choice of goals, compassionate in our means of cooperation and our pursuit of these goals. Compassion affirms the principles of dignity and justice for all. From the Buddhist worldview, all things originate in the mind. Real appreciation of humanity, compassion, and love are the key issues. If we develop a good heart, whether the field is science, commerce, or politics, since the motivation is so very important, the result will be more beneficial. With a positive motivation that takes account of other people's interests as well as our own, our activities can help humanity. Without such a motivation, our actions are likely to be detrimental. This is why compassion is so very important for humankind. So then, in Volume 3, His Holiness goes on to say, the greater our compassion, the more peace we will experience. So you might think, okay, well, how does that happen? And he goes on to explain this. He says, my personal experience is that meditating on the suffering of sentient beings and generating compassion for them helps me to develop inner strength. With inner strength, when inner strength and self-confidence increase, fear and doubt diminish. That makes us naturally more open to others. Others then reciprocate by being friendly, and this nourishes better communication and more positive interactions with them. So this sounds very amazing. And of course, this is His Holiness speaking from his place of practice. He goes on to say, on the contrary, and this makes total sense, if we are full of partiality, fear, hatred, and doubt, the door of our heart is closed. We know this one. And everyone we encounter appears suspicious to us. We know this one too. The sad thing is that we then believe that others are just as suspicious of us as we are of them. That creates distance between us, and this spiral fosters loneliness and frustration. So I can think of 2 very clear examples that show what he's talking about here. In 1988, I went to New York City for the first time with a friend. I had read about how scary New York was, and I had read about how to behave as a tourist and what to do and not to do. And I was trying my hardest not to look like a tourist. But I was absolutely terrified for about 9 of the 10 days that we were there. And then to top it all off, we stayed in a YMCA that was in the worst place in town. It was the worst place in town in that time period. And I was not a Buddhist at that time. I was a lapsed Catholic, but I was saying a lot of Hail Marys all the time. And so I saw everyone as dangerous. I was suspicious of everyone. And the only time that I really got a break from that was when we were in museums, some of the time, and in some restaurants. I could sort of relax. But out in the street, oh, I was just a total mess. I was just trembling the whole time, and I looked like a total tourist. In fact, at one point, we were waiting for a stoplight, and the person said, "Oh, I see. Yeah, well, the gallery that you want to go to is over there." So we were just standouts. The second time I went to New York City was in 2018. By this time I was a nun, I had a little bit of practice, and I was also with New Yorkers who knew their way around, and we were going on the subway, which I did not do in the first visit. And because I was not seeing others with that same kind of frightened mind, I saw a very different population in New York City. And of course, they were responding to me in a different way too. Maybe it was the robes, but I was smiling instead of, trying to run for it and hide. So it's true, the way we look at others really has an impact on ourselves and on them too. So then I got to thinking about what His Holiness is talking here about, this building strength, thinking and meditating on the suffering of others and having compassion for them. And so I've been doing the Lamrim topics on those topics for years. I really, really resonate with both of those topics. I want to do them, but to be quite honest, I don't do them on a daily basis. So what's occurring to me is, even though I'm cycling through the Lamrim most of the time, topic after topic, and some days I find a topic that suits what's going on, I haven't made the topics of, the sufferings, the 3, the 6, the 8, and having compassion for those as a daily practice. So that's one thing that's missing for me. And then, of course, I'm not at the same level at all as His Holiness. Make no mistake about that. I'm not mistaken about it. But I have this aspiration that if he sees this in his, lifetimes of practice, and in this life, that this brings inner strength, I want that. I want to have this inner strength that can look at the suffering of others and have compassion for them and to try and be of benefit. His Holiness goes on to say, all of us, but especially the younger generation, has the responsibility to make sure that the world is a peaceful place for everyone. This can become reality if we all make an effort to cultivate compassion. Our educational system should focus not only on training the intellect, but also to train the heart. And so, a number of years ago, His Holiness really made this come to fruition. He has invited many people, monastics and lay people, educators, to come up with a curriculum that is now called Sea Learning. So if you want to learn more about Sea Learning, there'll be a link in the description of this BBC. And this is a K-12 education program for international use, created at Emory University to provide educators with the tools to foster emotional, social, and ethical intelligence in students. It's an absolutely beautiful program, and this program is really spreading throughout the world. So he finishes up by saying, let's help future generations learn to be good citizens of the planet by modeling compassion and tolerance ourselves. So this is very clear, direct advice from His Holiness. And in this life, I can't be a doctor. I can't join Doctors Without Borders. I'm not an aid worker. I don't have the skills that are needed in many of these places that are in conflict zones or natural disasters. But what he's talking about is something that we can all aspire to do, and even if it's just aspiration right now, to bring to mind the sufferings of others, specific situations, and then to cultivate compassion for them. And look at the benefits. We'll have inner strength, we'll have more inner strength. We won't be blown off course by fear and doubt, and our heart will be open so that we can develop better communication skills and have positive interactions with others. So let's keep this aspiration of full awakening alive in our minds and hearts. I'm going to certainly now make this a daily practice. I want to know about this inner strength that comes from this kind of practice. And let's rise to this responsibility that he's asking all of us to do, to model tolerance and compassion. And each of us, I've mentioned this many times, we all have our own sphere of influence, and we may not even be aware of who's watching us at any given time. But we have an impact with the way we think and speak and act. And thank you, of course, to Venerable Children for making these teachings so clear and available.